Hey, what's up there, Mr. Montgomery Harris? I really appreciate you coming on to the right mindset.
Oh, so-
Yeah, thanks. I like that you dressed up.
Well, any excuse to dress up is a good excuse, right? So,
Well, I feel bad because I'm dressed up like a sociopath. They look like everyone else.
how do you know this isn't a steampunk sociopath?
Well, I heard those are the most metally kind because not only do they like metal and everything, they also like to metal and everything.
Yeah.
So,
Yep.
we encourage puns on this show. Uh,
The yeah, there is the hat size usually indicates the type of character you are.
mhm.
So, the taller the hat, the more psychotic you are, or something like that.
So a tall, large hat would make you the antagonist.
Yeah.
A smaller, stylish hat
Yeah.
would make you the protagonist.
A flat cap is like the common folk hero.
Now, does that are you prone to write steampunk literature?
Yeah, I started as a horror author,
Hmm.
and then I'd worked on this fantastic werewolf kind of zombie crossover story, and it
Hmm.
was all set to take place during a great plague, and it was way too realistic for 2020, the opening scenes. So I
Yeah.
just decided to scrap the book because I'd used a bunch of government documents to do my research, and it all seemed a little bit too real for release in 2020. So I thought, I'm switching to my other love. I'm going full steampunk from now on. So
Are
that's
you
what's.
are you saying the werewolf was reminiscent of the COVID virus?
It actually started. The first two books were all about the spread of the lycanthrope syndrome,
Yeah.
and it was everyone was divided into zones, and cities were left to themselves based on their resources. And it was like the first book was this big meeting taking place in Annapolis,
Hmm.
where all these advisors were around the president,
Oh.
and it was just too close to home. And I said, if they send hospital ships to New York and Los Angeles,
Yeah.
I'm scrapping the book.
And they did.
And the next day they did just that. So
Now,
it
was it only werewolf lycanthropes, or did you have like people could turn into rats or bears or other variations?
okay, we're gonna go deep. It
Yeah,
was
let's go a little
actually
deeper.
okay. In the story, they capture a werewolf.
Okay.
The agency captures a werewolf, right? And they develop a way of crossing this werewolf disease with rabies and dropping it as a chemical weapon into places like Tora Bora, where there's lots of cave systems.
Okay.
And the idea is it's the perfect chemical weapon because everyone ends up unalived because of rabies,
Yeah.
but they've actually turned into werewolves and just basically slotted each other. It was the perfect deniable weapon because they could just blame it on rabies from bats in caves. That was the
Yeah.
plan. Unfortunately, with to make a good horror story, things have to go wrong, and there was a new drug developed 6 months before the story happens, which is a cure for the common cold, and everyone got it for free. You
Okay.
see where the similarities
I
start?
do. Yeah, they're already there.
So everyone got this drug called Neverland,
Okay.
because it was called Wendy.
I like it.
I'm a big Peter Pan fan, so there's Peter Pan references in all of my stories.
Listen, sometimes you need a Peter Pan reference, or what is the story even about?
Yeah, exactly. It's the perfect adventure story for kids, but I'm digressing there. But so anyway, the disease gets out, and because they have this disease that can cure sort of like 99% of all diseases,
Yeah.
because it's a cure for the common cold, the rabies, instead of the rabies killing people off, it's keeping them alive, but they're only quasi turning into werewolves.
Okay. That's
So they're
interesting.
more like a zombie werewolf.
All right.
So
You,
the
you get your
humans,
zombies in there, but you also
yeah,
get to do your werewolves.
yeah. So it was like the true werewolves and the humans were working together in essentially a zombie werewolf last stand.
Yeah.
And it was because of the way that the disease was spreading. The first book was all about it, and you had sort of like far right people saying, "I'm not taking the drug." You had the anti-vaxxers going on about it, and it was like very political. To make it more real, I'd
Yeah.
gone very political and used a lot of, and it was just way too close to home, so it never went on sale. It was supposed to be released in June of 2020.
Now that's interesting though, because you definitely wrote it before it happened because you were ready to release it during that time period. It's almost a prediction of the civilization falling. But uh, was the fear that it was so close to home that your name as an author would be tarnished, or there would be too much pushback, and you weren't ready for that?
There was three things really. First of all, I had my beta readers saying, "What's going to happen next then in COVID?" And I'm like, I'm not Nostradamus. I'm just a writer. Don't
No.
persecute me. I'm just going to take this hat off. It's getting hot in
Yeah,
here.
go ahead, do that.
Um, so that was one thing that was bothering me. The second was the news was changing every single day, and no one knew what was happening. And it was like everyone was sort of like looking away to scream incompetence somewhere.
Yeah.
I didn't want the books fueling that fire.
Okay, that's fair.
And there was also the political division, and I had a group called the Marauders, who were essentially like a particular right-wing group that's out there right now.
Not MAGA.
um yeah, I'm talking more sort of like the Proud Boys or the Oath
Oh, yeah,
Keepers.
yeah, yeah,
They
yeah,
were
yeah.
more like that.
Those idiots.
And they were called the Marauders, and it was getting way too close to being almost a parody of what was coming, and I didn't want to be seen as a parody author,
Okay.
because once you're seen as a parody author, you can't be anything else, because no one believes you're writing. You know what I mean? They're looking for what it's a parody of, and it's just a story.
This guy's writing fan fiction of the real world.
Yeah, exactly. It's like a COVID fanboy. I didn't want to be that. So
That's funny.
yeah, it was really hitting close to home, especially when the other thing is when we started seeing. I don't know. Are you in New York?
I am in New York. I was in New York for the pandemic, and then I moved.
Yeah, I wrote a scene where they were putting lightweight sleeping bags in the back of trucks.
Oh, okay.
I didn't want to. Sorry, that was army slang. Sorry.
No, I know what it means. I know what it means.
Yeah,
My father was a veteran.
yeah.
So
They were putting them into trucks and they were lining the streets. And there was a scene where they're actually walking through Central Park,
wow.
and the bodies are lying in Central Park.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to go there. It was too much of what I was writing was actually on the news.
Yeah, I definitely. Once the trucks were overflowing, that's when it got really severe. And still, there were people like, "COVID's not real.
Yeah, yeah,
They're dying. They're dying of other things." And you're like, I don't think
yeah.
enough people die from like other things to have to fill
It,
up
it, it
trucks.
was almost like the Black Knight in Monty Python, wasn't it? 'Tis but a flesh wound. No, it's not. You've got bloody COVID.
Get back here! I'll bite your legs off. Uh,
So
all right, so your journey obviously didn't begin with this Lythenrope book. You've been writing since you were young, or was it something that you kind of was like, this is a new part of my life? How did your writing journey begin as an independent?
well, let me take you back to the 70s. Now, I had a teacher named Mrs. Kelsey. There's a great saying that you will never forget a bad teacher and you'll always remember a good one.
Yep.
Mrs. Kelsey was probably the best English teacher. So if you're out there, Mrs. Kelsey, this is your boy. She entered me into a writing competition from a short story I'd written
Oh wow.
based on history. And excuse me. and it was an historical event, and we just had to write our own fictionalized version of that story. Um, and she entered it into a competition. It won the competition. It was on the wall, and I really didn't think that much of it. But then the next thing, I'm in like the top group for English and everything, and I'm enjoying writing. And when I was deployed in the military, sometimes you didn't have a book, so I'd just sit there and write and scribble.
Yeah.
Um, and I always wrote like little stories that didn't go anywhere. I just, I scribble in notebooks and just say, how would I write that story? Um, and then when I moved to the United States, I was really big into paintball and airsoft. So I started writing fictional worlds for airsoft and paintball military simulation games.
Okay.
And that took me into a few LARP games where I was writing.
Mm-hmm.
And then when my eyes and my kidneys and everything went bad, I couldn't do that anymore. And I was sitting around feeling rather, down with myself,
Yeah. Yeah.
because I've always been an active person. And my wife said, you're always writing stories. Why don't you write a book? And I'm like, no one's going to buy a book that I write. I write games. I don't write books.
Yeah.
And she says, well, give it a try, because it's better than just sitting around doing nothing.
Uh-huh. Agreed.
My wife's a Philly girl, so you can imagine how she actually worded it, right?
Yeah.
So
Had a few bits of vulgarity in there, and
yeah, there was a few motivating colloquies in there, to say the least. She's also a Flyers fan, so you can imagine they were really raw, encouraging words.
they have to
So I actually got pissed off with her keep going on about it. I'm sorry if I'm not
be.
supposed
No,
to
it's
say
okay.
pissed off.
There's no beepers on here.
Yeah, I says, right, I'll show you who can write a book. I'll prove you wrong. And then he did really well.
And you're like, son of a bitch.
No, I've got to write another one. And I actually started getting people interested. And I was also learning to cosplay at the time. So I was talking to a bunch of cosplay friends and says, wouldn't it be good if we recreated all of the characters and they became the characters on the book covers?
Yeah.
And we started doing that. And so it was like all of my hobbies came into one.
Yeah.
And that's what I do now. It's like I cosplay my characters and my friends cosplay my characters, and we make the book covers and I write the stories. And then my cosplayers, when they're out, tell the story, and it just goes full circle. And now I've switched to steampunk, which was always like my favorite cosplay, because it's that perfect mix of history. So it's really gone full circle, because now I'm writing alternative history, which is like my first thing that got me into writing, was writing an historical fiction piece when I was 12 years old.
It all comes back, like who we are is who we
Yeah.
are, right? And you bring up something I definitely wanted to talk about is you're an author and you are legally blind.
Yeah.
So one
Clinically blind.
clinically
Yes.
blind. What one might even think, well, how does he see the buttons, the screen? How does he know he's spelling correctly? And like your wife said, instead of sitting around and that's who you were, but let's see who you could be. And you took charge, and out of spite, you wrote the book, and it was successful. To get over that hump
Completely
for,
split.
for audiences listening, when who may dealing with hardship, or what they're used to has been challenged, and they're in a different life. What was the solution for you to break that hurdle, so you could be so you could write coherent stories that you had control over?
Yeah, the biggest hurdle was me.
Yeah.
That was the what you've got to understand. Like, when I first lost my eyesight, I was completely blind for like 3 months, because this eye was taken out and this one was injected with gas to save it.
Oof. Yeah.
Um, and that is a horrible, horrible experience. Living in the dark is a horrible experience. It's I wouldn't wish it on my worst enemy. You know,
Yeah.
it's a terrifying place to be when you're that dark. And the more isolated you are from the world, the more isolated you become in yourself. You know, um, the more you just don't want to you don't want to be in a situation where you think you're going to walk into something, like
Yeah.
walking into doors and stuff.
Yeah. Absolutely.
It's very hard to get that confidence back, especially when you were a confident person like I was before.
Hmm.
And I really do have to give a shout out to the incredibly underfunded Montgomery County Society for the Blind here in
Mm.
Pennsylvania, and the Pennsylvania Society for the Blind, and the Congress Library for the Blind, because they're three groups of people who got my confidence back,
Hmm.
along with the fantastic support group I have with my family. But the first thing they taught you to do was like, the first thing they do in rehab is to hold your head up again.
Yeah. Of course. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
because when you can't see, there's a tendency to sit like this, because you're
Hmm.
shielding your face, which is a natural thing to do.
Hmm.
And they get you to, open your face. They take you around a shopping mall and get you to walk around a shopping mall again, and they show you all these tricks for navigation,
Hmm.
and they slowly build your confidence back up, and they work very closely with your family as well
Yeah.
to help you get your confidence. Don't do that for them, they
Yeah.
have to. um and anyway, that was the biggest obstacle, was getting over me and getting the confidence to sort of like say, I want to write. And it was also the Montgomery Society for the Blind, who have a volunteers group who will help you. And they got a volunteer to type for me if I wrote the story down on paper. And there's something called a 2020 pen, which
Okay.
is like a Sharpie, but it doesn't penetrate the paper. You can actually write with it, and because I see in contrast, you can actually learn to write by hand.
Oh, interesting.
Um, that didn't work, unfortunately, because she was she was typing up the work for me, and this was like in 2008, right?
Yeah.
2009. So the speech software wasn't as good then as it is today.
Oh
So
yeah.
she was typing the work up for me, and I was like, I can't read it. And like, when you're a writer and someone's reading something out to you, it's very difficult to say, no, stop there, I need to correct this.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a process because, like,
Yeah,
listening is not the same as reading it, and writing it is definitely not the same as dictating it.
yeah,
So it's almost like you had to learn how to write again because
absolutely.
yeah, you understand storytelling and structure, but the actual process from brain to hand to page, and then it's no brain to mouth to the screen, and it's screen to ear, and it's like, wait a
Yeah,
minute, I have different tools I have to master.
yeah. And the more I was writing, the more people saw it was a new passion. It was getting me out of bed on a morning.
Which is good.
People were saying, "Hey, have you seen this high contrast keyboard?" And I'm
Yeah.
like, "No," and that's how I type on that.
Oh wow, look at that thing. Oh yeah, yeah, because of the blue and yellow,
Yeah.
and that
So
makes it
that
just. Are you seeing in black and white in your
I
eyes?
see in shades of orange.
Oh, okay, okay.
Yeah, 50 Shades of Orange is my new book. No, I see in shades of orange. To give you a visual, because I'm a writer and I should be able to do that.
Yeah.
Um, Imagine looking through a pair of sunglasses with grease on them,
Okay.
and in the bottom corner of your eye, someone's shining a flashlight into your eye.
Mm,
And the only clear bit is like a small drill hole through the center of the sunglasses.
yeah, and you got to kind of like
Yeah.
adjust your head to kind of.
Yeah. Well, I like, this is my angle for seeing best. Um, so that's what it's like. So I see in contrast with that tint on it.
Yeah.
But we found the keyboard. Someone gave me a TV set to connect to the computer so that I can magnify it to 500%.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a 32-inch monitor set to 500%
Yeah.
magnification on the computer. My mother-in-law actually was she bought me the old Dragon software, Dragon 13.
And what's that? Is that the speaking? The
Yeah,
speaking?
the
Yeah.
dictation. I mean, you don't need it anymore. It's available on Word now. You just
Yeah.
have to go in and say it. But I started with that. I could actually read at the magnification, and the tools just kept coming because the more I could work on a computer, the more tools I could find. And now I have magnifiers everywhere.
Yeah.
I learned to use a table saw and a bandsaw again.
Wow.
Yeah, and I've got 10 mistakes left. Um, I
You'll
learned,
figure it out.
yeah,
All right.
I learned how to use knives again. It was just all these new tools that you have to learn, and you have to learn to use the tools.
Well, speaking of learning tools, like Ray Charles, obviously, he went blind as a child, and he had to learn to, as you're saying, relearn how to navigate through life. And there's like a really funny moment in the movie where he's like cooking chicken,
Yeah,
and the girl's like, "What are you doing? Cooking in the dark? You could have burned the place down."
you might.
It's like I'm blind. And there's actually a Bill Cosby joke with Ray Charles. He walked in on Ray Charles shaving, and the bathroom was, the light was off. And Bill Cosby's like, "How do you see what you're doing? You want me to turn the light on?" And Ray Charles, "If it helps you."
Yeah, it's the most common one I get is "it's over there." That's great. That's great. Perhaps if you pointed, you'd help the blind guy out a little more.
Yeah, right.
But
Do you?
yeah,
It sounds like you've had this I guess affliction for since 2008, 2009. You were saying, or
2008, 2009, it went over that period.
yeah. So you've basically have learned to adapt completely. It's almost like you're in a whole new life,
Mhm.
and it definitely sounds like you have a sense of humor, which is so important to the healing process, uh,
Absolutely.
and finding your strengths. And you were saying something about your kidneys, and I had kidney cancer back in 2016, and they removed stuff, and it's like, so yeah, if you don't have humor to get through those kind of pushbacks on life,
Hmm.
you're just not going to make it. Like, it's so difficult to
Well,
like lie in that no pun intended, but that darkness
yeah,
of
it's
what's next.
you can either get busy dying or you can get busy living.
Great quote from my favorite movie ever, Shawshank Redemption.
Yep.
I'm sure if you've ever listened to my YouTube channel, I talk about that movie all the time.
It's just a great movie. It's one of those rare things where the movie is exactly as good as the book, if not a little better.
Yeah, and the book and the movie, they do have their different perspectives. There are,
Mhm.
like, especially if someone's never read the book. If you read the book after seeing the movie, it's not the movie. It's loosely based off of that book,
Yeah.
but the themes are there, and perseverance is there, and it's interesting. We're talking about Shawshank Redemption right now. The Andy character, Andy Dufresne, right? He is
Fine.
Dufresne. I can honestly say I liked Andy when the first minute I met him. Uh, is you and I, more so yourself, for going through what you've gone through, is you can't live in the environment that you're put into. You have to find a way to live outside of that environment. And Andy did that.
Yeah.
That was the big thing. He was never really in prison. He's always hopeful. And you had such beautiful people in your life to pull you through that hope and get you writing. And now you get to bless the world with your stories and your books. And there's a passion, there's a purpose, as you said. I have a
Yeah.
reason to get up. And I think that's really beautiful and lovely that not only do you get to inspire others with that kind of story, but your books I'm sure there has to be elements of those struggles, maybe not in the same context, but it has to leak into your stories, does it not?
Oh, definitely. You see, I'm from a very blue collar family in the most blue collar part of England. You know, from
Liverpool?
Black Country. Now I'm just outside Birmingham, a place called the Black Country.
Oh, okay. All right.
Um, it's the industrial heartland of the city. So I always saw that as I never saw that as a struggle, but I saw that there was a difference between the working class and the privileged classes. I saw that as a difference, seeing the eyesight and then going through and getting the kidney transplant and everything.
Mm-hmm.
That was a struggle. Like if you're a working class family, you don't know that you're bad off because everyone around you is exactly the same and you're happy.
Yeah.
It's like no one walks around in a working class family going, "It's so depressing." You learn to have a laugh, right?
Yeah.
Um, so some people say, was it a struggle going to university? Was it? And no, it wasn't. It was a struggle going, through everything I went through. But at the same time, I think the one gave me the strength to do the other.
Absolutely.
You
Yeah.
know, because and that's the one thing that comes through in most of my characters that your past and your future are defined together are tied together in the present, and you can draw from both.
Yeah. Well,
Um,
what's that old saying? To learn to move forward, you have to study your history, your past,
yeah,
right?
yeah. I think it's Winston Churchill saying the key to the future is history as well. It's
That's it right there. And he
um,
was a smart man, so
he was horrible
absolutely.
man, but a smart man.
Yeah. um. So now you've obviously been writing for quite some time now. It's 2022.
Hmm.
Are you prone to write in a series, or do you like one-off books? What has been your most for you specifically? What do you really enjoy doing? Do you like the series, following a series, writing within a series? Maybe not the main character, but jumping onto different character. Or are you a fan of the one-offs?
I yes and no. I like a one-off story if it's a well-written one-off story. Like it gives you a clear beginning and end, and the characters you don't want to see the characters. You know that there's nothing to learn from those characters anymore. I'll enjoy that one-off. Unfortunately, there's not that many of them books around anymore.
Yeah, that's true.
Because um, I like a series set in a universe rather than or in a world
Okay.
rather than like there was a question the other day on TikTok. How long is too long of a series? And I'm like, a universe you can write in forever, but
Yeah.
a series is only as good as the character's arc lasts, and sometimes you can bring out those other characters. Um, so I would say I'm a world builder
Mm-hmm.
author more than a series author.
Okay.
As a standalone, I am not good at killing my darlings at all. I cannot write a standalone book. I get to. Do you remember the movie Roxanne with Steve Martin?
Oh
And
yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah,
Absolutely.
that movie is one of my favorites, and I cannot stand to watch it because I always feel that they built up such a good cast of characters in that movie. I felt robbed that there wasn't more movies set
Yeah.
in that town. Um, so I think it's you restrict yourself when you write a standalone on how much you can explore your characters. There's if you'll allow me a moment to digress, I
Yeah.
gave a presentation on character creation
Okay.
at a convention a couple of years ago, actually about 5 years ago.
Time
And
flies, eh?
somebody says, how many characters should you put in a book? And I always said, if it's a standalone book, never more than 6 characters that talk.
Okay.
unless they're like very, like they have to interact with a sub character. But if you think of 6 characters, you've got the good guy, the sidekick, the love interest,
Mm-hmm.
the stranger on the side of the road character,
Yeah.
um, and you've usually got a bit of a clown as well, and then you've got the antagonist and the antagonist's sidekick.
Yeah, they're henchmen.
Yeah, they're henchmen. If you write any more characters than that, you're leading to a point where you can't wrap up the story.
Yeah.
So I always say, for a standalone, if there's any more than 6 characters, you're actually building the start of a series.
Yeah, because if you have a series, in certain books, certain characters don't need to have a lot of time given to them.
Mm-hmm.
But with a series, you could explore them. I'm with you with world building in the sense of if you're writing within a universe, even if you write a one-off book, it still has the grasp of that world, and you could refer to things, history that are potentially being built from other books. And I'm a big fan of that. Like I like writing 3 books per arc, right? There's a
Yeah,
beginning, middle, and end. But they're all attached to a bigger world, and there's a lot of little bits and pieces of history thrown into those books, and characters that just kind of pop in and pop out, because that's where they are in the world. They're in that region, and I think that gives your readers a chance to not only explore other books that aren't necessarily in those main series, but at the same time, while they're reading another book, if you mention that, it's like, oh yeah, that's right, this is one big world. And it kind of, I'm not sure if you've ever read the Dragon of Twilight series. The Margaret Weiss and Tracy Hickman, they wrote like the Dragonlance books, and you had Tristan and Tasselhoff and Starum and Rosalind and all that, and there's like maybe like 15 or 20 books.
yeah. I know of them because I think they were on Six Figure Authors once.
Oh, maybe, yeah. I mean, the books were huge,
Yeah,
massive sellers in the 80s. And obviously it's attached to the Dungeons and Dragons, which is TSR, that eventually became Wizard of Coast, which is, I think, owned by Hasbro now. But um, what was nice about her stories, though, is you could read the Trials of the Twins, and it's 3 books, but you still know the history if you read the Dragon books, the
yeah.
and it was nice to kind of be like, oh, I'm attached to this world. So that's really great that your books, I'm assuming, are like that in a sense.
Yeah. I mean, the Age of the Navigator series, which is the one that's coming out in April. It's getting launched on April 1st. The first 3 books.
Of 2023, everyone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry. Yeah.
Just in case they listen to this, they're like, well, hey, it's April. Where's this book?
Yeah. I'll be launching that in Baltimore at Telltale Steampunk Con
Oh, nice.
in Baltimore on the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd of April. I'm giving them a plug because they gave me one.
Well, I'm giving you the outlet.
Yeah. And that series I wrote as I took some inspiration from the Marvel universe, to be honest. I wanted to bookend certain stories between epics. So
Oh, that's cool.
Impetus and Peril is an epic book. It's like 135,000, 140,000 words, right?
Yeah. So it's a romantic comedy. No.
Yeah, it's a story of a man and a woman who found to love each other and then died in a shipwreck. Before falling into a combine harvester.
Erotica in the horror world of steampunk.
Because it's alternative history, steampunk is the genre I'm going with.
Yep.
I've tied in real world events and put steampunk on them.
Oh, very interesting.
And it starts in 1857, and
it's set in like our Earth.
It's set in our Earth with steampunk. Like, if you can imagine, if we lived in Universe Alpha,
Yeah.
This is Alpha Point 2. It's that close.
Okay. All right.
It's like pretty much everything's happening, but for a few minor changes. Like, um, the United States ends at the Columbia, Missouri, and Mississippi and Ohio rivers.
Okay.
Everything north of that is the United Native Nations Council of America,
Okay. Okay.
up to Canada.
Yeah. And obviously, everyone travels in a floating ship with.
Very few, because this is set at the point where airships begin.
Oh, okay. Okay.
So it's like there's balloons,
Yeah.
but it's as balloons are turning over to airships.
Mm-hmm.
So that's happening as part of the story. The vehicle that is the big craze, the one thing that's coming in, is the Navigator. The Age of the Navigator is the series,
Oh, nice, nice, nice.
and a Navigator is basically an all-terrain vehicle.
Yeah.
So what I wanted to do was um, create the characters, but each of these navigators, each of these crafts, as a personality of its own, and the crew are representative of that personality. So you have a very serious one, you have an adventurous one, you have a comedy one, you
Yeah.
have a bit of a slapstick one. You have a fumbling idiot, because steampunk needs a fumbling idiot in every single story. You need a fumbling idiot.
I believe it's in the Bible for steampunk.
It's taking the normal and making it as ridiculous as possible.
Yeah.
So like, one of the big things in this story is the Sky Guardians, which are the United States Coast Guard in steampunk, 70 years before the Coast Guard existed. So they are actually called, before I reveal what they're called, do you remember in the old Western movies how people used to shout, "Here comes the cavalry"?
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
they'd come charging over the hill with the
Yeah.
horns blaring,
Right. Yeah.
and they'd come in and save the day.
Yeah.
How could I make that as ridiculous as possible, right? And by ridiculous, I mean the name, "Here Comes the Cavalry."
Yeah.
So I created the United States Coastal Guardian Services Lifesavers Division Women's Balloon Auxiliary. So when people think they're going to be saved now, instead of saying "Here comes the cavalry," it's "Never mind, here comes the United States Coastal Guardian Services Lifesavers Division Women's Balloon Auxiliary."
And they're dead by the time they finish.
It's like,
That's
but
funny.
I wanted to create these, and they're all manned. All the balloons are manned by women, because they can put 6 women on a crew, whereas they can only put 4 men on because of body size.
Yeah.
But that joke actually bit me on the ass, because when I was doing my research for another panel I was doing, because all of the female characters, do we say female anymore, or women characters?
I believe you have to say women.
Okay, that was one I only picked up the other day, watching She-Hulk.
Yeah, because female is derogatory in the sense that it's I believe the argument is it's a representation of a species gender, and woman or a girl is human. So when you say female, you're degrading the person to be not human. That's I again, it's like you said, it's fairly new, something that I've been hearing. But
It's an ever-changing world, and I'm doing my best to keep up. So if I offend anyone, I'm doing my best. The more I learn, the less I know, but the more
right.
I keep learning. Right. So
yeah, you can't do math on day one,
yeah. So so all of the women of the Coastal Guardian Services are based on real women pilots from 1900 through a real event, which is going to become my first non-fiction book, which was called The Powder Puff Derby.
Okay, it's a good name.
And it was a real thing that happened. It was an air race of women pilots from San Diego to Cleveland.
And it was called the Powder Puff?
It was called the Transcontinental Air Rally.
Yeah.
Women's women something. I can't remember it off the top of my head, but a comedian called it the Powder Puff Rally in a newspaper, and that's how it became known.
Yeah.
So,
That's a good name.
but it was sabotage from day one. I mean, there was a woman killed on the first day. A pilot who was very well respected. Amelia Earhart flew in it.
Oh wow.
There was a Poncho Barnes was like Poncho Barnes and Ellen Smith were no, it wasn't Poncho Barnes. It was Bobby. Yeah, there was Poncho Barnes held the record for the fastest flight of
At
men
that
and
time.
women at that time.
Yeah.
But someone stuck a magnet underneath her compass, so she actually ended up in Mexico because of the compass, and she still came back and came third in the race. Another one had sand pushed into a gas tank.
Mm-hmm.
It was
It's
they
never
was
good.
sabotage from day one. But anyway, it was all based on all of the women of the Powder Puff Rally and other women, like Harriet Quimby, the first woman pilot
Mm-hmm.
in the United States, and she was actually the first woman pilot to own a license to fly.
Oh.
And she would have been the second, but true story this. The woman who would have had the first controlled flight actually had something broken in her airplane, and as she stepped into the airplane, it took off, and because her foot got stuck in this broken lever,
Yeah.
and they said you can't count that as the first recorded controlled flight because you actually broke your airplane.
Yeah.
2 weeks later, Harriet Quimby made the first flight. So I was writing this anyway. I was writing this thing about women who had worked in lifesaver departments or as pilots. And there's a famous story in England of Grace. Her name's Grace, and she took her boat out and rescued people from ships in 1812. And she raised a lot of money for what became what we know today as the Royal National Lifeboat Institution. But at the time, it was actually known as the Royal National Institution for the Preservation and Saving of Lives from Shipwrecks. So my joke actually turned out to have less words than the real deal. The things you find when you research.
You know? And it's funny that you had to research it, and then you're like, son of a bit. I thought I came up with the longest name.
I have been left with egg on my face. It's funny though. It was like, it's one of those great things I can add to the end of that presentation when I give it though, that it was like, if you thought it was ridiculous, you say that now.
Well, what did I say? Nothing's more ridiculous than real life. You know?
Yeah. If you wrote real life as a comedy, it wouldn't be as funny as something you'd made up, because I can't remember what the exact saying is, but it's
something like that. Yeah, because it's like, nothing's as obscure as or odd as life, because it's so weird, the things that we end up living through as a society, as a group of people, the things, or when you hear stories where you're like, somebody got eaten by a corn chipper, and you're just like, how? Well, they were on their phone. What? Who was driving?
it is crazy, the things that you see in real life. Just for instance, the lycanthrope syndrome. People, when I first proposed that story, they said that's completely far-fetched.
Yeah. And you're like, look,
see, I called it right.
I had to change it to Latham wrote because I had foreseen the COVID, but I didn't want it to be COVID. Yes. Call me Nostradamus today.
I originally wrote that book as 16 quatrains.
All right. So, let's. I have one more question, and then we could wrap it up. Um, are you an author who? Yes, you are. No,
Yes,
are
I
you?
am.
Excellent. Good night. Are you an author who maps out uh future books? Now, I'm not saying outlining the stories, but I'm saying like you go, you know what? I have these stories to tell, and I know when I'm going to tell them. Are you someone who does that, or are you, you write a book, you focus on that book. When that book ends, then you start thinking, what should I do next? Or are you somebody that sort of knows where you're going with the series of books?
I'm a Bible outliner.
Okay.
I have. I'm not going to hold it up because
Yeah.
it's heavy, but I have 6 binders in here
Wow. Okay.
that are just 6 binders. 4 of them are Age of the Navigator, and then one I have a series called Con Cop, which I never get to write. I just keep outlining it, which is a silly story. It's just a silly story,
Yeah.
but I want to write it though. And then I have another binder which is characters, just characters. Don't have a story for them yet, but I think wouldn't it be a great idea to have that? I always have a nun in my books.
Mm-hmm.
Every single story I've ever written, there's a nun.
Always.
Always. And the reason for that is when I was a kid, we were broken down in a parking lot, and this nun pulled up with a bunch of board games and entertained us for the afternoon. And I thought it was
Oh,
just absolutely brilliant, considering I wasn't, none of us were Catholic, but she got out and she entertained us. And I thought that was really special. And I always thought it was really cool. So whenever I have like a truly selfless character, that's the nun.
I like it.
Um, but when I was first started writing, I had this story of a conspiracy about the murder of George Patton. That it was
Okay.
actually a conspiracy, and it was going to be found out 70 years later. And I've still got the character written down there, and the only thing is the character is standing in the middle of the Mummers Parade on New Year's Day in Philadelphia, and the line is, excuse my French, you can bleep this out actually, is step away from the fucking nun. And that's all the character. I don't know what I want to do with that character, but that character has to say that line.
Yeah. No matter what,
No
whatever
matter
the
what,
story is.
the entire story will revolve around the character saying step away from the nun.
Well,
Um,
sometimes it happens. You're walking
yeah,
around, you get this line of dialogue, and you're just like, that
yeah,
isn't I need an entire story just so I could say this line. It's
yeah,
so
yeah.
good.
And it's just that is a cracking line to drop into like a punny 1980s action movie in it, But I have a binder of just characters, character lines, character ideas.
Yeah.
Um, so I plot those characters knowing that one day I will fit them into a story. And whenever I'm thinking I need a character here, I will go to the character binder. But I will build more. I will build, then I Bible build, and then I will plot out from there how my
Yeah.
series is going to go. But I'm more of a world builder who knows when to stop building worlds and start writing.
Well, yeah, a lot of new authors, they sit there and they go, I just have to have every little detail. I gotta, and it's like, why
Yeah,
don't you let the right have a general idea
yeah,
and let the writing lead to the growth of the world? And you shouldn't explore a world that isn't integral to the narrative. And I think
yeah.
starting writers, they do that sometimes. They'll spend too much time on, oh, it's really cool, the history of blank blank blank, but it has nothing to do with the narrative.
The advice I always give to new readers is imagine you're going on a road trip.
Hmm.
You know the city that you're going to because you're going there for a reason,
Yeah.
right? You know the city you're leaving because that's your home. The world in between, you're going to find out on your road trip. You know you're going to stop at this place, but you don't know that much about it.
Yeah.
And you might know that 40 miles off that road, there's something really cool, but you're not going to go there
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
in this story, but if you was traveling on the northern route, you might.
Yeah.
So just keep in mind if you say, oh, if you're riding and you pass a sign that says, like Valley Forge State Park.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's a place in Western Pennsylvania that every single year they say Covered Bridge Festival. I've never stopped there,
Exactly.
but it's something I would put on my. If I'm there and I have time, I would go and see the Covered Bridge Festival. That's what you need to do when you're outlining a world. Stay on your road. Think
Yeah.
of points of interest outside it, but don't go there yet. Wait till you're on a road that takes you there.
Absolutely. And even in a story like that moment is sort of like you can say that it exists because you saw the sign. You could be
Yeah.
curious about it. But when the narrator goes off and's like, yes, this has been going on for the last 20 years, and like it starts telling you the reader about what that is, it's like, but it doesn't do anything for the story
No,
to go, to tell the history of these tree branches.
no, it doesn't. And W.E.B. Griffith. Have you ever read any of his books?
Uh, he's sci-fi, if I right or
No, he's historical. He's
oh, historical fiction, like, right? He takes
yeah,
like,
historical fiction or alternative, kind of hard to believe kind of way. But it's basically they always have a military theme around them, so it's like
Mhm.
military fiction.
Okay,
It's mirrored. I stopped reading him. I went and bought a book. It was so it was supposed to be coming out. It was a hardcover book.
yeah,
I went and bought it, and like I'd spent like this was a while ago, but like when I could still read a book, so it was like 17, 18 years ago, I think.
yeah.
And the entire book, 700 pages, was just filler. Nothing happened in the story because he was telling you about the world and the route that a plane would take from Argentina to the Skunk Works in
Yeah.
LA. And
So
I'm
it was a
reading
history book.
and I'm reading this book. It wasn't even an history book because what he was writing about never happened. So it wasn't even
Oh,
an
okay.
history book. It could happen. And I'm like, why have you just put me off your reading forever?
Now, you didn't finish the book, right? You put it down.
I finished it because I've never DNF'd a book ever.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
It'd just be funny if at the end, the last page, it
yeah,
goes, "This is me punking you."
yeah. I have DNF'd one series. One series I have DNF'd.
Which one was that?
The
Harry
Embers
Potter.
verse.
Oh,
No, the Embers verse series by S.M. Sterling. It started off as one of the greatest speculative sci-fi, speculative apocalypse stories I've ever read.
yeah,
And it was essentially the all of the communities broke down into their niche groups. So there was like a group of Wiccans.
hmm,
There was a group of LARPers who set up their own community.
yeah,
Um, there was a set of potheads who lived in California who set up their own community. But they all interacted together, and it was really good, the story and how they were vying for dominance and rule and everything like that. And then it got to book 9,
yeah.
and I thought, this guy is taking some serious unprescribed medication, and he's just writing down what he saw, and it just got crazier and crazier. And
Yeah.
by the time I got to, like, I think I had 2 books left in the series, I was like, I'm not wasting any more money on this series. It's horrible. It's gone from being this post-apocalyptic novel to a mirror universe horror story, and it just doesn't make any sense for the two to
Yeah.
be in. So that's the only series I've DNF, but I've never not DNF'd a book.
But that one earned it because you already put a lot of time into it. And
Yeah.
like, I'm not.
It was like, but to read, I think it was like 9 books of a 12-book series.
Yeah.
and
That's
then just be completely put off. And I've spoken to people who've read the last book, and they said the last book of the series is basically just people sitting around a table reminiscing about the previous 11 books. I'm like, okay.
sign me up to miss that.
It was horrible, and it's I think it's a fair review.
Yeah.
It's like I'm not throwing shade. I'm not saying don't read it. Read it if you want to, but Jesus, I just did not like the ending. Um, I have I have picked up books and read them till the end of like the first book in a series,
Yeah.
and thought no. And then I started reading. I don't know if you've ever done this. You've picked up a book not knowing it was part of a series, and you're like 4 or 5 books in,
Yeah.
and then you're like, okay, I'll finish this book and then I'll go and start from the beginning,
Yeah.
or I'll stop reading this and go to the beginning. And if there's any steampunks out there watching this, and any non-steampunks who want to know about steampunk, please check out Gail Carragher's Parasol Verse.
Yeah.
Because the Girls' School trilogy, well, quintilogy,
Yeah.
it's breathtakingly good. Breathtakingly good. A floating school in the southwest of England that trains girls to be assassins from the age of 13.
Oh, that's cool. That's an interesting
Um,
story.
and one of the tutors is a vampire.
Oh, well, you had me at assassins, but vampire.
Yeah, a vampire teacher who has altitude sickness.
Yeah. Well, that must suck. Yeah.
Uh,
That's a,
no, it actually sends them insane. If a vampire goes above a certain altitude, they go insane.
well, that makes sense because they're
Yeah,
already, deadbeats.
yeah, yeah. It's it's absolutely a brilliant exploration of, and there's actually a type of steampunk now which is actually called a carriger pigeon, and that is a steampunk that wears collar. Is a carriger pigeon.
Well, they had a good childhood. That's leads them to. I do remember somebody had handed me a book and said you got to read this book, and it was my first book from Dragonlance from the Dungeons and Dragons, which got me into. But it was like the third or fourth book in the series, like you're saying, and I
Mhm.
was like, this is great. What's the next book? And they're like, no, you want to read the first book, and you're like, well, why wouldn't you give me the first book? Because
Yeah.
in this book, people are dead. It told me that people died, and I was like, okay.
Spoilers.
Spoilers. The best pitch that made me not want a series for the Dark Tower series. This kid I knew, he's like, listen, this is the best series you'll ever write. The first book will blow your mind. You kind of have to drudge through the second and third book, but once you get to the fourth book, it's good. And I'm like, I am not going to read 2 books that are huge
Yeah,
just so I can get to something good.
he's right though.
Yeah, I'm sure he is.
He's right. Very
but,
right.
but imagine that, like, oh, the first book's great, but then the second 2 massive books, you kind of have to just read to read. And you're like, no, why don't we just jump to the next stage? But listen, Mr. Harris, Mr. Montgomery Harris. Look, I had a great time interviewing you. I'm glad we were able to highlight you on the Right Mindset podcast. I think it's fantastic that you're creating these worlds that you basically overcame something that could have stopped someone else, but you decided to create a second life, and you have the support of such amazing people, and that has to be a lesson in itself. Is in your lifetime, surround yourself with people that care for you, that are loving, that support you even when you fall. They're there to help you up, and I think you'll go further in life with a great circle of influence around you, rooting for you. So before we go, though, obviously, I'm going to have your information in the video description saying where they can find you. But because this is also audio, why don't you tell the audience if you have a website, just give the website. If there's a specific social media you want to give, go ahead, let the audience know.
Okay, the best place you can find me right now is on TikTok. I do most of my work on TikTok, and that's the Steampunk Wordsmith. My website is montgomeryharris.com.
Okay. And for anyone listening, that's MONTGOMERYHARRIS.com.
That website is currently being revamped
Oh, nice.
by a very close friend of mine. So there's nothing there right now, but there will be very shortly. I'm told by my birthday, which is December 13th. So
Oh,
I'm
well,
told.
happy soon to be birthday.
Yeah, thank you.
Welcome to another year.
I've had 50 more this one. I've had 50 others. I'm not looking forward to this one as much. And you can also find me on Instagram, Steampunk Wordsmith.
Okay, excellent. Thank you so much, Mr. Harris. Thank you for again, as I'm saying, for jumping on here. And I loved hearing your stories and some tidbits of the world and the history. I always like history, so it was pretty cool to learn about the female the women pilots,
Yeah.
and hearing about that. And yeah, no, definitely check Mr. Harris out on the TikTok. He's very fun videos. He's very interactive, especially if you follow him, and so good energy. I love the community on TikTok, the writing community.
Right.
So it's always positive. Until then, though, everyone, remember to keep developing the right mindset. Bye bye, everyone.